Hello friendos! Here's a video that has taken an embarrassingly long amount of time to get recorded, get up, get going, get. Essentially, a few things that threw off my groove, for lack of a better way of putting it. Making the 20-second video that I put at the end where the annotations are. The Sims were not cooperating, and I'm not used to controlling so many at once. I'm gonna have to start using the teleport any sim and pose maker at this point because it's redonkulous. Though granted, I don't usually do sim families quite this big. This is a 5 sim family, not including... yes, 5, I can count. A 5 sim family and a cat and a dog. Though granted, I ended up nixing the ending that used the cat and the dog. I was thinking of having the ending screen being the dog chasing the cat around, but that didn't work out well either. I had a lot of ideas that didn't work out well. What else is new though, right? And then on top of that, once I finally did get the clip that I wanted to use in order to, in order to have the final scene, I sat down and I did the recording, and I did a good job, and I had it all done, and then I was like, oh yeah, and then I hit stop, because I have a record audio button that just has a play and a stop. It doesn't actually show me the levels while I'm recording. And I watched the recording slowly render, and then I saw the audio line across the bottom of the screen, and it was a flat line. I had my microphone muted the whole time. So hopefully, the finale of the family farm build is worth all of the trouble that I have gone through. Personally, I think it is. I still consider this one of my better builds, not just in its scale, but in its detail work as well. Especially when we get up to the upper stories and start doing the teenage rooms, because I definitely tried to approach this as though they were characters, and tried to build spaces that somewhat reflected their character. Perhaps it's a silly approach to take to this, given that people don't usually download a sim family and a house and put them both in at the same time. But for me, I don't know, maybe my work won't go wasted. That sounds silly. I'm not against people refurnishing the houses to match their own Sims. I would not be against that. Having houses that suit your Sims is actually very important to me. I'm not a huge fan of designer houses that, don't necessarily suit the sim that live in them. So it'd be very hypocritical of me for me to be like, no, do not change my house at all. No, I really want you all to personalize it, make it really feel like your sim lives there. But when I put in so much work to make sure my Sims look like they live there, I do wonder if someone's going to have families the exact same dynamics, or not. The answer is probably not. That squeaking is Harris joining in on the recording. Say hello, Harris. Of course, now it's the squeak. I am actually considering doing some Twitch streaming with these. I do need to do a little cooperation with my computer if I want to really get that working, because it has a very poor CPU. Sometimes just recording this is a problem, much less live streaming it and having some overlays for Twitch. But I'll figure it out. You guys are worth it. My point being that if I do Twitch stream, squeak, 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 squeak. If I do Twitch stream, I'll probably be basically bringing a to-do list every episode, usually with the Sims that already exist. I might occasionally do things where I'm making new Sims, but for example, one of my upcoming things is to revamp this house and update it for seasons, because I now have seasons, but I did not have seasons when I did this build. Another thing on my to-do list is to woohoo the Scarecrow. I think his name is Patches or Patchy. All I know is the fact you can do that is really funny to me, And I think I'm going to use Clarice, my witch sim, in order to do that. So that's a plan I have. Clarice's home would also need to be updated. I have not updated my early builds for getting the DLC. That in general could be fun too. So even if the personality of the builds doesn't necessarily pay off in terms of people who are looking for buildings that they can download and use for themselves, I think it will pay off in doing, you know, Twitch streaming, because I am going to be focusing on one lot primarily during those streams and on that one sim. And since, you know, it's not exactly a storybook where you can hear what all the sims are saying and understand Simlish, you need to really get the finer points of the character from, you know, how they choose to decorate the space. I think it's a part of why I also tend to really love small builds, like the really cluttered ones, because you really get a sense of a character for that space. I believe Cowboy Bebop is the one I really like, where they, you know, you only see some of these characters for, you know, one scene, or not even a full scene, frankly. But you could tell from all the things that they decorated their little metal capsule in space with. You know, you could get a handle on what their values were, what they liked, okay, you couldn't really tell what they disliked, but that kind of thing, where you can just look at a room and get a grasp of what kind of character lives in there. That's the thing I really enjoy with designing these kinds of spaces. Which I guess is a sign that I'm not coming in here leaving an interior designer. Not to imply interior designers don't do that. Just, a lot of things are intentionally unaesthetic, I guess. I'm not really sure how to describe it. Point being, they don't necessarily look like, you know, they're designed homes as much as they are just places people go. Side note, I really like this mudroom that I made, and I timed talking about the mudroom poorly. I don't always remember to put in mudrooms, partially because I live in an apartment right now, and an apartment's not really going to have a mudroom, but that was a staple of quite a few houses, because especially if you live in the Midwest, where it's either going to be snowy or rainy half the year, having a mudroom where you can come in, stomp off your boots, and then take them off so that you're not tracking mud all over the place. That's a real family detail that was very important for me to get into this build, because it is much more of a family build than I have ever really done in one of these videos. Most of the time, my sim families, family, air quote, one or two sims. Unless you count pets. And even if you count pets a lot of the times. So doing a build that was supposed to fit 5 sims and their cat and their dog, I think that gave me a lot more room to explore what a family home needs as opposed to a home that a single person needs. For example, a single person probably doesn't need a mudroom as much because there's only one pair of shoes that can be taken off. They can just leave them in the kitchen. But a family, they're not they're not just going to leave them all, you know, in the doorway. They need to have like a designated place to do that, because otherwise stuff will get cray-cray, yo. I actually planned for closets for once in this build, partially because I did spend so much time beforehand getting it right. A lot of times I'll build a room and be like, closet would probably be really practical in here. I didn't plan for it. I don't want to adjust my build that much. Which is silly. I shouldn't be that reluctant to change my rooms around. But I think part of it might just be I also tend to go a little smaller. And when you don't have that much room to spare, it's hard to justify doing a 1x2 or 2x1 or 2x4. 2x1, 2x2, 4 squared. There, those are the numbers. And I just bragged about being good at math earlier. So this is where I really think that designing for a space for a character really shows well, is in the teenager rooms. This room that I did here was for the teenage brother, the only boy of the family. He's kind of going through a bit of an angsty phase right now. He's got the gloomy trait, and I drew a lot of inspiration for how my brother would decorate his rooms as a teenager. My brother didn't really go through an angsty stage so much of the time, as much as, you know, just a music lover stage. So along with, you know, a nice healthy dose of teen angst, this character likes movies, they like music, and one of the I guess, challenges of a teen room is it's not just a space for them to sleep. It is also a space for them to bring their friends and to have some privacy. You could say the same is true for child rooms, but in my experience, young children don't tend to crave privacy the way teenagers do. I think a teenager is much more likely to have like a sanctuary feeling to their home, to their bedroom. And I tried to incorporate that into these Sims. Another thing I like about teen rooms, and I think I mentioned this with the teen common room, I guess, is how they really want to just cover the walls in as much of their personality as they can. You've got your decals, you've got your stuff. They just really want to, you know, they finally are exercising some of that sense of identity and putting that identity over as much space as they can so that people know, you know, this is who I am, even though people may not necessarily be allowed in their room very often. So in this case, there's movie posters, there's a calendar, there's a couple weird things that I feel like they probably found at the thrift store, like the spider and the steering wheel? I forget what the wheel on a boat's called now. Oh my gosh. That's embarrassing. You know, in almost all my room builds, I tend to have a side table light, but I don't think I really started having one of those until I was an adult. And even right now, my current room layout is there's a bedside light on the other side of the bed, not my left side, because I usually go to bed first, whereas Tony tends to go to bed after me. So he's the one who wants to have a light on but not keep me awake. I do have my string lights though. I do love them string lights. Of course, a mirror so you can get handsome in the morning. So this bedroom does interest me a lot because this is for one of the triplets. Obviously, there's only 3 of them. It's got to be one of them. Specifically, the one who wants to be the responsible adult. She feels like the way she can really set herself apart from her 2 siblings is in how much more mature she is than them. So when she designs her bedroom space, she wants it to look a little like an adult space. But here's the thing, when you're a teenager designing what you think is an adult space, it still reads as a teenage space. Like, there's just some elements to the space that it's very clear you're picking what looks mature rather than, you know, what actually suits your taste. Though there are still some childish things as well. For example, that big stuffed cat. A teenager, in the grand scheme of things, hasn't really been not a kid for a very long time. And there's still some sentimental attachment to those things I had as a kid. So while she's got like her utilitarian looking dresser, and she's got a simple bed, and she's trying to stay down on the furniture, she still is at heart a kid. And she may not necessarily be proud of it, but it doesn't mean she can stand to get rid of her favorite stuffed cat growing up quite yet. So maybe from just the way I described it, it would imply that her room is showing a lack of personality. But I believe that the fact that you can see in the room how hard she is trying to make it look like an adult space, that shows a lot about her personality. And oh my gosh, Emily, get rid of the cheats menu. It's in the way. Oh my gosh, Emily, why don't you get rid of it? I know why I don't, because I don't always want to move everything on for very long, because I still want the room to be functional. So I don't bother getting rid of the cheat menu, because I don't think about how good viewership is at the time, I guess. Emily. So the last bedroom is the final triplet. Again, because there's 3 of them, so obviously the 3rd one's gonna be the final one. Anyways, this particular triplet, she draws the most from both of her parents in terms of her hobbies. She enjoys art, and she enjoys gardening. And, you know, she basically has that blog on Tumblr that's, you know, they post their art and they post pictures of their plants, and you're just like, oh my gosh, they live the perfect life. And her struggles are building an identity that doesn't reject the interest she got from her parents, but doesn't let her just be a clone of her parents. So while her mom does do a lot of painterly things, this girl probably is more interested in things like graphic design, things that are much more loud and in your face and a little, not quite kitsch, but maybe a little more on the Dada side. So just because she is the one who has the most interests related to both of her parents' jobs, chances are she's the one who's expected to inherit the farm. She's, got the most aptitude for plant stuff. Painter stuff, I guess, isn't really something they expect you to inherit. And whether or not she wants to inherit the farm isn't really something you can say when she's a teenager. But I do imagine that, when she goes off to college, there might be a bit of a struggle between, picking a future away from home and picking a future that requires you to go back home. And, I don't know, if she was a person, I'd be very interested to see where it's going to go. Since she's not really a person as much as a sim, I'm the one who decides where she goes and, if she even goes. Because, I'm pretty sure I have aging off, unless you, manually do it. Because, I didn't build these sims so they could grow up and live a full life. I built them to be snapshots of what I want them to be at the time. I love the unlock hidden objects cheat. Getting all these posters from around town. I like to imagine her, having to go to town once in a while to run errands and stuff, and just always keeping her eyes open to see if there's any posters she hasn't gotten. She probably really loves street artists and local artists and wanting to support them as much as possible. Her identity kind of is a bit of a messy art identity. I mentioned that she'd be the one who'd be most likely to take on the farm, but that's probably not true. Her sister, the responsible one, might be the one who'd expect to take over the farm. Honestly, it'd be really interesting, again, if they're real people, to see how it would go. I think if the more mature of the sisters were to take it over, she would either learn to be a better farmer, or she would just hire out for a lot of the labor, and she would focus more on the business side of things. So what I'm working on now is the first of many guest rooms. Initially, I think a lot of why I wanted to do so many guest rooms was because it just was a big space, and I couldn't think of what else to do with it. However, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it's actually very, very practical to have a lot of guest spaces in this type of home. Because frankly, people are going to visit your home, assuming that you're social. And when there are 3 teenagers, at least one of them is bound to be of a social stock. And, when you live out in the middle of nowhere and people are visiting, the polite thing to do is to give them, a place to stay the night. If it's someone from school, chances are they came over and, either you can ask their parents to pick them up when you're done, or, you just have to, say, hey, you can stay the night. And it just makes a lot more sense to have a spare room that they can stay in than to expect them to cram into one of your children's twin beds. And let's say that there's family visiting from out of town. I don't know how many people besides me have almost exclusively out-of-town families, but that is my situation. And when people visit, they might be from out of town or even out of state. And if you live in a very urban area, they can get a hotel. But when you live in the middle of hecking nowhere, the polite thing to do is to let them stay with you. And depending on how long they're staying, affects how much space they might need. So there's a guest room for if someone's staying for the weekend, or maybe a short amount of time. And then there's actually the guest house where someone's having a much more extended stay. That might even also work in a farm where if you hire anybody for the season, hey, it's a busy time of year, we're going to hire some people, board is included, room and board, etc., etc. I don't know enough about farms to know exactly how that's done, but I'm assuming that you can do it that way. I really, really hate designing and decorating hallways, because just rooms that lead to other rooms. And, there's sort of a common area, so it's hard to put so much personality in them, especially when it is a larger home like this. It's just a place people pass through momentarily, not necessarily a place people spend a lot of time in and, project a lot of personality onto. I really love how those roofs came out. I am happy with that. Honestly, I'm happy with this whole build. I am pleased as punch with how it all came out, but especially things like the roof. And now now here comes the time where we start designing the outside space. When you live in the middle of nowhere, it seems like a lot of times people do their celebratory things outside. I'm guessing it's because, you can't go out so much. Like, for example, with my family, when we had our graduations, we still lived on the farm. And we would have basically all of our friends and family over, and we'd all usually have like a cookout or something like that. And people could all sort of group up depending on who they want to spend time with. I want to spend time with my friends because I was a teenager, and that's what teenagers do. My family members want to spend time with my other family members because that's what family members do. I apparently do not count in this list of family members because I didn't think about it too hard. Your siblings' friends who, they got invited because you're having a party, and your sibling shouldn't just be sitting there going, I don't know anybody. You let them in on the party too. They can bring their friends and sleep over with them too. So in my case, I went to a school of 200 people. Definitely my brother knew my friends. There's no risk of that. Having this patio area basically makes it with there are 3 kitchen counter spots. There is this patio, there is the main kitchen, and there's the guest kitchen. Do you want to guess just how many times a sim will start a meal in one of them and then do their food prep in one of the other places? Too many to count, viewers. Too many to count. And it's a little frustrating. Granted, I haven't played tested recently. It's possible that in one of the recent patches they sort of fixed it a little bit. I don't know. I don't know a lot of things. I forget to do curtains a lot. You can tell when I realized that I haven't done some kind of item when I go through all the rooms and do them all at once. I love putting curtains on doors, even if realistically I'm not so sure how that would work unless you had a door that, already came with an attachment for curtains, because curtain rods can be kind of heavy. It seems a little silly to, hang a heavy curtain rod on a door. But what do I know? So here's the guest house. This place is essentially a reclaimed barn that has been sort of given a modern decorating scheme because it's supposed to appeal to whoever might be staying in there. Examples people might be staying would be, if they do hire any seasonal workers, they would stay in the guest house. If family is staying for a long time, anyone staying for a long time, they'd have the guest house, so that way they could have a little privacy in case they needed it. Just like, say, one of the kids is having, or say the kids are having some big party, and it's gonna, it's during the weekend, and everyone can stay up all night. They're not gonna be bothering their parents with that nonsense. They're gonna go have the party in the guest house. So if they just, at 2 a.m. want to bake a pizza, their parents don't have to, deal with that. Which, remind you, the parents' room is on the ground floor. It'd be really hard to not hear that. So the polite thing to do in this case is stay in the guest house. When I lived on the farm with my family, my brother actually had there were a couple outbuildings, and my brother had one, and I quote, I had one. I'm still a little bitter about that because I wanted to make a studio space, and it ended up being more of a storage space for my parents' stuff than it was a studio space for me. And I don't think my parents at the time really realized how much stuff in there was theirs, because I think they felt the appropriate solution was for me to invest the time that my brother did in his space, because he did invest time in it. And his space ended up being essentially an unfinished guest house. And during the summer, he would actually sleep in there. He preferred that to his own bedroom. Partially because he could just have friends over and they could all crash there for the night. He could stay up late without worrying about bothering anybody. I can't remember if there was electricity in there or not. There might have been. It's been a while, so I'm not really 100% sure. So I guess the moral of the story is a guest house doesn't even have to be a guest house. It can be a place where one of the family members decides they want to spend their free time because it's a space that they can have control over. For example, in this particular guest house, the mom actually uses one of the rooms as her studio space. And we'll be actually starting on that in just a second here. I was worried I'd forget about the bathroom if I didn't do it before I did the studio space, which frankly is a fair concern. And there is the laundry room. You know, I don't even own one washer dryer. I have to use the apartment ones. And these people, they got 2 washers and 2 dryers and a clothesline. Just sometimes when I live in The Sims, guys, I want access to The Sims stuff. And it's not just because I have all the cheats memorized and can get myself infinite money. It's not the only reason. So while making this studio space, I kind of tried to focus on the things I would like in studio space. There's a chart for paint, so that way if you do need to pack it up, it's fine. Nicer easel. I'm talking faster than it's being built. So yeah, I've got the nice tabaret there. I really miss having a tabaret. If I ever am able to make a studio space again, I'm getting one. I use the paint bucket items because I thought they just look cool. There's a little library card that's supposed to have art books on it, because honestly, being able to look at and recognize art books is very helpful if there's any new styles you're approaching, or just, you know, if you're just having difficulty with creativity, just recreating paintings can improve your skill. Hot tip from Emily. And a big old canvas drying rack, which in some ways seems a little unnecessary, only because only one sim is really using this. And yeah, you can have multiple paintings going at a time, especially if you do some heavy layering with your paintings. I'm just not used to one sim needing a whole big dryer rack like that. Personally, if I had the space, I could probably just lean all my paintings against the walls while I work, because I don't need to worry about anyone coming in and knocking them over. I do like that little studio space. And because I have a sitting area downstairs, I made a secondary one up here instead of doing another hallway. I have some plants here, which I sort of hemmed and hawed about for a little bit before deciding if the mom's coming up here every day to, you know, paint, she can water the plants. That's not an unrealistic expectation to have of her. Oh, and here comes the tedious part where I just lay down and plan out all the plants placement. This part actually reminded me of using the Stardew Valley farm planner, which I think is part of why I really wanted to do a farm build, because I enjoy planning what my future farm is going to look like, even though I haven't played Stardew Valley in a little while. And, you know, having that sort of symmetrical, everything's got space, all the like items are grouped together, I enjoy that kind of organizational aspect when it comes to crops. That's part of why I really liked making the plasma fruit orchard a little while ago for vampires. On top of the fact that it was very inconvenient to have a vegetarian vampire. When I do go through and update this build for all the new stuff, I'm assuming that there's new plants with the seasons pack. I actually haven't checked that yet, even though I've, you know, done a couple things to test with the seasons pack. We'll find out, I suppose. But, you know, this layout's not bad either, though. The only downside is that when you are doing your watering, it takes 500 years. Which is why, even though the dad is technically the farmer of the family, everyone helps out with the farming, because it would literally take him all day to take care of all these plants, were it not for cheats and everyone else helping. A couple of the cheats that I am using for plants, I do have a debug, which is mostly just for if a plant gets missed and... No, not plants get missed. Mostly I use it for when I'm doing other builds, immediately growing up the flowers so that, you know, they can look nice when I'm doing the pictures. I have a cheat that makes it so you don't have to water trees, because you don't really have to water trees so much, especially after they start getting big. So it seems silly, quite silly, which definitely made things easier for the farmer, because he didn't have to water all those crops and water all those trees. That would have been ridiculous. I don't think I've ever actually seen any of my cats use a scratching post. Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I don't think I ever saw it, but I'm sure if I didn't have one, I would see a cat ripping up furniture. It's a dichotomy. This plot was actually supposed to be just decorative plants. So rather than having a lot more functional plants and taking up more of my Sim's valuable time to focus on farming, I used some of the items that don't need to be watered. Now, if I remember correctly, in Sims 3 you did have to water your landscaping plants. So this wouldn't have worked out quite as well in Sims 3. But here, they don't need to be watered. They do adjust with the seasons, I have found out, but, you know, more just in their palette. I did the lavender because, you know, some people do grow lavender. It has a nice smell. You can use it for a lot of different things, and I just like it. I'm gonna use that cactus because it does just kind of look like a root plant's spout sticking out. And then the hostas, because if you make them bright green a little smaller, they look kind of like lettuce, and I like lettuce. Lettuce is yummy. Lettuce actually doesn't have much of a taste, so I shouldn't call it yummy. But I do like lettuce. I feel good after eating lettuce. In general, I enjoyed how all the landscaping came out. Not just the very manicured parts like the crops, but some of the less manicured bits and pieces. Like this little corner garden I'm about to do here, which is more just like a collection of shrubs. I love those rocks. I don't think rocks get used enough in landscaping because they can look both intentional and they can look really like, oh, hey, a rock. I can't remember the word for the opposite of intentional. Besides unintentional. That'd be redundant. I'm trying to get out of the habit of putting big grass sprouts around my houses because I feel like I just waste a perfectly good foundation by covering it up with all that grass. And honestly, a lot of times it seems silly. Like in this case, they're a farmer family. They probably have a weed whacker. They can probably go over and whack those things close to the house and, you know, not have to keep it long for no reason. Not to mention, you know, if it was overgrown everywhere else, it makes sense. It does not make as much sense when it's like the only place there's grass. Silly empty. I think one of the things I like most about landscaping is having things that are very balanced looking without being symmetrical. Not to say I don't do symmetrical things, especially if I try and get very more modern looking homes. I tend to go a bit more symmetrical because I want them to look very, very intentional. But in this case, I want it to be like, you know, one of the family members, probably the dad, maybe the mom. You know, just the beginning of the season, they went to their local greenhouse and they bought a bunch of stuff and they spent a day planting it. The side one is much more intentional, comparatively, where yes, it's still the beginning of the season, you went and grabbed some flowers, but in this case, you tried to plant them in rows. So this one is very symmetrical. And while it certainly serves the purpose I need to serve, it looks like someone has a very specific garden. I can't say I necessarily like the way it looks as much as the less symmetrical ones. I don't say I think it looks bad, per se. It just doesn't look as organic. I do like pairing those wisteria-looking ones with the sunflowers. It looks so nice. Did I do the thing where I put down... No, I didn't. Sometimes I'll put down, like, those grass squares, and then I'll put plants on top of them, and you can't even see the grass squares anymore. And it's like, why did you do that, Emily? Because it makes me feel better. I know that there's grass under there, and it makes sense to me. Also, why do I bother doing terrain paint if I'm going to put the grass squares on top of it? That's definitely a waste of time, Emily. Silly Emily. Why are you doing that? Because I can. I like that for once with my trees, I remember to use the brackets to up and downsize them. Granted, not all the trees can pull that off super well, but with the really thin trees, it just makes them look taller. I guess thin's not the right word. Bare, maybe? The ones where they don't have a whole lot of foliage that balloons from them. And here's another little landscaping thing, because I was realizing that there's a lot of space in this build that I didn't necessarily want to just not use. So I guess on top of, you know, being a farmer and farming stuff every day, the dad is maintaining well-landscaped, I shouldn't say well-landscaped. What I consider well-landscaped for me. I don't know if other people consider my landscaping especially good. Though, to be back on topic, the fact that this is being maintained, I don't think it makes actually a lot of sense in the character. This ruins the immersion a little bit, because they aren't rich enough to hire someone to come in and landscape stuff for them, but also, they have stuff to do. I love using rocks to make, like, natural fences. Just, that looks so right. I really hope, we get an expansion that actually gives us more rock varieties. I know it's a silly thing to ask for, because, even with the ones we have, it doesn't look too much like they're just getting repeated everywhere. I like having more options, especially if I could have some really big ones. Because yeah, you can scale up the rocks, but things can get kind of weird when you scale them really big. Because you can tell that their texture isn't really meant to stretch across something that big. A little bird bath. And last but not least, the fruit stand. Having a produce stand is very important to me, because that's an aspect that I really consider a huge part of farming culture, I guess. Not necessarily because I really was on an active farm. I've referenced living on a farm, but it's basically I lived on a space that could be utilized as a farm. Not I worked on a farm and lived on a farm and we raised crops and had animals and stuff like that. We had some barn cats. That was our livestock. But I do remember at the time, because when I lived there, I was going to college, and my college campus was an hour's drive, because believe it or not, that was actually the closest college campus for me. So every day, I would wake up around, I can't remember if it was 5 or 6, I think it depended on if I had 8 a.m. classes that day, and I'd always be driving. I'd spend a lot of time on the road, and I remember always passing by these produce stands, no matter unless it was the middle of winter, because Midwest winters are hard. There was always the produce stands up, and there'd always be something for sale. Maybe it'd be strawberries, maybe it'd be pumpkins, maybe it'd be corn, maybe it'd be blueberries. I don't remember what all was always for sale, but I remember just thinking that they were an important part of the landscape to me, and seeing them constantly out, that meant something to me. I also always found it interesting that, there wasn't always even people at them. Sometimes they just left their crops there, and they had like a little bucket for you to put your money in. And I guess people must have been honest about it, because if people take your money too many times, I think that's about the time you would stop doing that. But they kept doing it, so I guess most of the people in the area must have been decent folk who wouldn't take that. And I don't know, I guess I appreciate that. I also like how there's a section where the mom can sell her paintings. Because, some people have galleries. This lady, she puts her paintings on the side of the road for you to sell. And a little farm sign that might mean something in Simlish. Probably nothing to do with farms, though. I love the sign stuff. I wish there was more stuff that would go onto those sideboards. Because, sometimes I want to have just like a wacky little decal on there to suit whatever thing I'm thinking of. Like if I want to have, like there's that Animal Tarot decal, which now that I've said it, is probably one of the items that you can't go on there, but having a sign with that little palm reading decal for someone who's a palm reader, that'd be adorable. That'd be cute as heck. And then I have this little clothesline, which is also fun to make. Well, we're approaching the end of the video here. In retrospect, I'm still super proud of this one. I definitely think there are things I'm going to do to improve on it, because I do have seasons now, and I guess by extension there are things I'm going to have to take away, because, a lot of the spaces here right now are very intentional, and I probably can't mess with them too much, but we'll figure it out when it happens. So, as per usual, if you go to the Sims 4 gallery and search #Valiant Gaming, you will be able to find our builds. There's also a link down below if you want to click on it. Other links down below include our social media pages, as well as a list to all the mods that I use. Regardless of whether or not they're actively being used in the video, every mod I've used ever in these videos is on there. So, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care.